This session is on distance leadership, making distance not an issue. It's about the mindsets and the habits that enable you to lead anyone from anywhere, particularly important in the situation we have now where we have many people working from home and we need them to be productive, not only by themselves, but working as a team. Hope you enjoy the session. Do you speak in the language of achievement or the language of busyness? Outcomes is the language of achievement, and the language of busyness is activities. What I found when you're leading people at a distance is that you have to speak in the language of achievement, outcomes, and progress. You want people to own achievement, not just doing something. And it's a matter of really shaping all the outcomes they need to achieve and focusing on the milestones towards achieving those outcomes. If you're just focused on the activities, you're more a micromanager. And micromanagement actually comes with a speed limit. Because you're operating to the speed of your head to tell everybody what to do. So you want to get people to own the outcomes and then monitor the progress through the milestones. So you're not back and forth all the time just tracking activities. I think the biggest question you can ask as a leader is asking people how are they going to achieve the outcome? Because they're going to take much more ownership for their how, their milestones, than they would for yours. And when you're always telling your people what to do, you're saving them from thinking. And if you save them from thinking, you save them from growing. The ultimate focus for a leader is really direction and pace. So, there's always lots of good things to do. And especially when you have people spread all over the place, it's everybody has their own good thing to do, but it's really choosing between great and the good. And it's what it's going to move you forward faster. So direction and pace is that ultimate criteria that way. The outcomes you want to achieve, it ends up being the direction. The pace is driven by how you monitor the milestones. You want people to own those milestones to keep the pace as well. So when you're dealing with people, especially virtually, you're having a lot more different types of meetings and things. And you have to focus your meetings on outcomes too. Because have you ever heard this expression? We need a meeting to discuss something. You probably heard it all the time, but discussion is an activity. It's not an outcome. If you want to be really focused about your interactions with your people when you're leading them from a distance, you want to focus your meetings on the outcomes. And there's only 3 outcomes for meetings. It means an agreed decision, an agreed action, or alignment. Everybody understanding it the same way that they say so they take consistent action after. So what I'd say is be more outcome focused in your leadership. Ask more questions about how they're going to achieve it versus telling people what to achieve. And it'll really show, it'll end up in your inbox. Because the more outcome focused you are, the fewer emails you're going to get because you're changing the conversation to achievement and progress versus just has something been completed, has something got done. And the last thing is this, that your people feel more pride too, because there's more pride in achieving an outcome than it is in completing an activity. So watch your language and always speak in the language of achievement and get your people to own more of the achievement than just the activity. There's a great leadership concept called NIFO, nose in, fingers out. It's also a great reflection question that you can ask at the end of each week. So nose in, it's all about asking questions. Putting your nose in, asking questions about how things are going on so you understand that things are being achieved at the pace you'd like them to be achieved. But your fingers aren't in. You're not telling your people what to do. Okay, the minute you give them an answer, you save them from thinking. If you save them from thinking, you save them from growing. And also, you give them the answer for that activity, they finish it, they're back to you for the next one. So it's about giving the people the outcomes to achieve, helping them figure out their own how to make it happen. That's your questions. But now, if you have to give them an answer, it's better to use a story or an example. Because psychologically, people don't really feel they've been directly told, but to get an idea about how to use it. Stories and examples are much more memorable, and they also sort of portray a context by how they could use that towards applying to what they need to do. And if they have a similar issue in the future, they probably could use something the same. So think about it. Use this as a good reflection question at the end of each week. Did I live NIFO? Was my nose in? Well, was I surprised by something I should have known? Or my fingers are in too much, giving the answer to some people. Should I be using more stories and examples so they can sort of see the answer on their own? The outcome focus and a NIFO type of leadership concept is a great way so that you can delegate more and get people to take more ownership for the outcomes and the achievement, not just the activities. So is communication, is it an activity or an outcome? A lot of people look at it as an activity. You know, I sent the email, I'm done. But the outcome of communication is getting the other person to think a certain way, getting the other person to feel a certain way, and getting the other person to do something. You know, you want them to take action and more action on their own, especially at a distance. So to create a feeling, there's two things you can focus on. The first one is you got to listen more. When you listen to people, they feel valued. When you're listening to them and they're coming up with their own ideas, they're going to take more action for their own ideas than yours. And then the second thing is to use more stories and examples. Stories and examples make what you say highly relevant quickly because it really triggers people's own memory. And then whatever you're saying, it becomes much more relevant. And also stories and examples are much more memorable. So a lot of us, you know, we want the conversation as short as possible. Do you understand? Do you know what you need to do? Now that's it. That's finished. So I think we have to be more communicative in terms of listening more, and we have to use more stories and examples. And then the other thing is that you have to be more consistently different in your communications. They say very successful leaders are very consistent in their behaviors, but when it comes to communications, you have to be consistently different. You know, there's 4 types of personalities in the world, and if you're communicating to everybody like you're communicating, it's not going to work. You know, there's an old saying, I think it's in the Bible and every religious document in the world, do unto others as I would like to be done unto. Well, it's not necessarily good for communication. You should communicate to others how they would like to be communicated to. That means constantly adapting your communication to the other personalities. Some people are very social and they want to talk more. Some people don't want, they want just the facts. Some people are more thinking type, more logical. So you need to constantly be adapting to others. The more successful you are at adapting and being consistently different, the more you're getting your messages understood. So keep that in mind. Focus on the outcome of communication and think more of feeling and you asking more questions, using more stories and examples, and then also being consistently different, adapting to other people. And the best way to adapt is to use stories and examples and add particular details in that match each person's personality type. How's our glue? That's the question I always ask my leadership teams to drive a culture of collaboration. And I view collaboration in terms of 3 levels. The first level is trust. People trusting each other to say what they're thinking and helping each other. The second level is information sharing. You know, people not holding information, viewing it as power, but sharing it freely. And also the information in a digital form so that people can access it from wherever they are. And the third level is common processes. There needs to be some processes that hold things together, but also show like the shared expectation in terms of what responsibilities everybody have. Now, the foundation of trust is really common interest. You know, when people share a common interest, they're willing to pick up the phone and deal with an issue real time because they can talk about their common interest first and then create the rapport for the conversation. That means they're not emailing each other and copying others and not getting issues resolved quickly. So you really want that foundation there of people picking up the phone, talking with each other. Because the more they're talking, the stronger the trust they're building between them. So think of the 3 levels for your organization. Building trust, information sharing, and then when needed, certain common processes that hold the organization together. So the key question is, how is your organization's glue? You know, you have 2 powers as a leader. You have a why power, an emotional power, and that pulls people to do what you want them to do. You have a second power. You're the boss. You can tell them what to do, and you can push them, sort of, they have to do it now. So you have to think about the combination you use, especially when you're leading at a distance. You have to use more of the why power, because the more you use the emotional power, the pull, the stronger it gets. But the more you're telling people what to do and just pushing people along, the push decreases in power the more you use it. But there's a real key thing that you can do, especially for leading at a distance, and that's to create peer pressure. Peer pressure gets people to do what they need to do because either they have to or they want to. And it's really key is that when it's visible what they need to achieve to everyone, then if they don't deliver, it hurts their reputation. They should feel guilty. But let's say that everybody understands what you're delivering and you deliver it very well, you're going to feel great pride. Your people are going to feel great pride in delivering it. So peer pressure has both a way to reinforce that things get done, but also it creates pride because what you've achieved and what your people have achieved is much more visible. So think about for your own organization, what can you make more visible to drive more peer pressure in your organization? And think about this, if you have zero peer pressure, where does all the pressure have to come from? That's right, you. I was listening to an interview with an entrepreneur on the radio one time, and the entrepreneur said this. He said, true entrepreneurs don't set out to create success. They set out to create the conditions that enable their people to create the success. So think about it. If I'm an entrepreneur and I need to be in company number 1 to keep it a success, when do I have time to start company number 2? And what I found when you're leading at a distance, you have to create the conditions for your people to create the success and to take action, make decisions, and collaborate on their own. So I found that there's 3 main conditions for enabling your people to create that success. The first one is clarity. Think about it. If something isn't clear in the organization, is something good happening or bad happening? So it's the leader's responsibility to create enough clarity that people can take action on their own. So the more they can take action on their own, they can get things done on their own, the less you have to be on the phone to them in Zoom meetings and all these things to get things done at a distance. The second thing is really around business judgment. Let me ask you this question. If you don't trust their business judgment, will you allow them to make the decision? So if you don't allow them to make the decision, you don't trust it, you got to get involved to understand enough to make the decision for them. So think of it this way. Think of your best person and they leave you on Friday and you trusted them 95%. And then the replacement, you only trust 30%. That starts on Monday. How does Monday morning look? Not very good. So you really need to have people you can trust to make decisions, not just get things done, but to make decisions at a distance. And the third thing is influencing skills. You know, the more you grow your people's influencing skills, the more they'll find ways to work and adapt with each other, the more they'll be able to influence vendors and customers directly, and then you don't have to be involved in the meetings too. So growing the influencing skills grows people's collaboration. So if you create enough clarity, people can take action on their own. If you grow people's business judgment, they can make decisions on their own. And if you work on growing their influencing skills, then they can really collaborate on their own too. So keep that in mind. And one tip is always be interviewing for business judgment. Because if you expect this person to grow in your organization, you're going to expect them to make decisions. So use scenarios and hire for business judgment. But then once you have them on board, find ways to grow that business judgment too. So the more decisions you can let go, the faster your team can operate, the more productive it'll be, and the better team you'll have, especially leading at a distance. Successful leaders say, my how is who. My how is not how. So let me ask you this question. Once you know what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, and by when do you want to achieve it, what's your next thought? Okay? Probably thinking how, but it really is who. Your first thought should be who, because if you're thinking how by yourself, you're limited by your own knowledge and experiences. If you take the how too far and then you give it to your people, it never feels like theirs. It always feels like yours. And the third thing is the faster you get a who involved, the faster you can get rid of it. I had a client send me an email one day and said, in the subject line, he said his subject line was, my how is who. And he said, I figured out my job. And that was how he framed his job. He had a huge problem. His first instinct was to call his best person in and tell them what to do. But he heard my voice in his head. So he called his best person in and said, could you come back tomorrow morning with a few options how we can fix this problem? Person came back the next morning with a few options. They picked the best one. He went and fixed it and did a good job. So he says, you know, my job is really finding the right who, motivating the who's, and make sure they're enabled to make things happen. So if you really want to lead people at a distance, you really have to be thinking who first. Now think of it this way. If you don't have a who is the who? It's always you. So when at a distance, you really want to enable them to take action, because everything that they can't do on their own, you have to help them do for them. So think about this. Next time you have an issue, instead of thinking how, first think who. Now it's time for a little reflection. A great definition of reflection is the opportunity to give yourself advice. So why not give yourself advice now and do a little reflection on what could you do more of? What are you already doing, but now you know why it's really important, same as, and what could you do less of? A great less of would be to give less answers. Get your people really thinking. So a great more of could be to ask more questions. So take a few minutes and jot down your own reflection of what things you could do differently. Maybe a different mindset or a habit, something that could improve your leadership in a much faster way. Just a reminder now that successful leaders think who before how. You know, think about it. If you don't have a who, the who is always you. So it's always around engaging people so that they can take action on their own, they can take decisions on their own, and they can collaborate on their own. The more you can enable those three when you're leading people at a distance, the more successful you and your team will be.